I thought I was the freest person on earth. I mean, I'm an American. We literally own the trademark on the word freedom, right? We have the Statue of Liberty, we have eagles, we have fireworks on the 4th of July, and we have the absolute unwavering belief that nowhere else on this entire planet even comes close to the level of liberty that we have in the United States. And for my entire life, I believed that down to my bones. But I need to tell you something. I was living a lie, a very well marketed, very expensive lie. I moved from the US to the UK about 2 years ago, and I was literally shocked to discover that everything I had been taught about what freedom actually means was completely backward. Here is the truth, and I know this might make some of my fellow Americans defensive, but we need to talk about this. I thought I was free in America until I lived in Europe, and I am not just talking about the obvious stuff like healthcare or whatever. I am talking about the very fabric of daily life, the psychological weight of simply existing. I realize that American freedom is mostly the freedom to choose between 50 different brands of cereal, while European freedom is the freedom to actually live your life without the constant, suffocating fear of financial ruin, burnout, or literally just getting sick. Let me completely break the pattern here and start with something that nobody ever thinks about when they talk about freedom. I am talking about time freedom. In the US, we would never ever expect to just casually take 4 weeks off work. Never. If you told your American boss you were going on a month-long holiday to Spain, they would look at you like you had just grown a second head. You would be fired. Or at the very least, you would be put on some kind of corporate watch list for not being a team player. In the US, hustle culture is a religion. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor. If you aren't working 50 hours a week, answering emails at 11 at night, and eating your sad little desk salad while staring at a spreadsheet, you are considered lazy. Also, if the public version of me is already this opinionated, join the membership below and meet the less filtered version. That's where the deeper stories, extra content, and slightly more dangerous thoughts go. But over here in the UK, oh my God, I was literally shocked when my British co-workers started talking about their annual leave. In the UK, almost all full-time workers are legally entitled to 28 days of paid time off every single year. That is almost an entire month of paid vacation, and that is just the legal minimum. Some companies give you even more, and here is the craziest part. They actually take it, and their bosses encourage them to take it. There is no guilt. There is no weird passive-aggressive email from your manager saying, "Hey, noticed you're logging off at 5 p.m. today?" When a British person goes on holiday, they turn on their out-of-office autoresponder and they essentially drop off the face of the earth. You could email them saying the office building is actively on fire, and you will get an automated bounce back saying, "Cheers, I am in Tenerife until the 14th. Please contact literally anyone else." Why is this a freedom issue? Let's look at the history because it explains so much. Did you know that the United States is the only advanced economy in the entire world that does not guarantee its workers paid vacation time? Zero. Zilch. Nothing. When the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed in the US back in 1938, which established the minimum wage and overtime pay, they totally left out paid time off. The assumption was that employers would just do the right thing. Spoiler alert, they didn't. In the UK, the Working Time Regulations of 1998 enshrined this into law. The psychological difference this creates is massive. In America, your time belongs to your employer. You are renting your life back from your boss one weekend at a time. That is not freedom. True freedom is knowing that you have a legally protected right to rest, to travel, to spend time with your family, and to remember who you are outside of your job title without risking your livelihood. And speaking of keeping you alive, let's talk about food. This was one of the biggest culture shocks for me when I first moved to London. I walked into a Tesco for the first time, and I felt like I had entered an alternate universe. In the US, we talk a big game about freedom of choice at the grocery store. You walk down the chip aisle in an American Walmart, and it is a quarter-mile long. But is it really choice? Or is it just the illusion of choice? Most of those products are manufactured by the same three massive mega corporations, and they are packed with ingredients that are literally illegal over here. I was looking at a bottle of soda here in the UK, and it looked different. It tasted different. And then I started doing some research, and I realized that British and European food laws operate on something called the precautionary principle. This is a massive structural difference. The precautionary principle basically means that if an ingredient might be harmful, if there is a reasonable suspicion that it could cause cancer or disrupt your hormones, the government bans it until the manufacturer can absolutely prove that it is safe. It is a proactive approach. It prioritizes the health of the citizen over the profit of the corporation. In the US, the FDA operates on a reactionary model. An ingredient is generally recognized as safe until thousands of people get sick, and then maybe, just maybe, after decades of lawsuits and lobbying, they might put a warning label on it. We are eating things in America every single day: potassium bromate in our bread, titanium dioxide in our candy, massive amounts of high fructose corn syrup, red dye 40, that are heavily restricted or outright banned in the UK. And American corporations know this. They literally manufacture two different versions of the exact same product. An American company will make a clean, chemical-free version of their cereal to sell in Europe and then turn around and feed the toxic, chemical-laden version to Americans because it's 2 cents cheaper to produce. How is that freedom? How are you free if you have to spend hours in the grocery store reading microscopic ingredient labels just to make sure you aren't accidentally poisoning your children? In the UK, I have the freedom of mind to just walk into a grocery store, grab an apple or a loaf of bread, and know that there is a baseline level of safety. I am free from the burden of being my own toxicologist. American food freedom is essentially the freedom for massive corporations to slowly poison the population in the name of shareholder value. That was a really hard pill to swallow as an American. But you know what an even harder pill to swallow is? The actual pills. Let's pivot to healthcare, because we absolutely cannot talk about American versus European freedom without talking about the medical system. Now, before I moved here, I heard all the classic American counter-arguments. You know, the ones, oh, European healthcare is terrible. You have to wait 6 months to see a doctor. The government decides if you live or die. The taxes are astronomical. I bought into all of that. Then, about 8 months into living in the UK, I got really sick. Like, genuinely terrified. Need to go to the hospital sick. My American brain immediately went into panic mode, but not about my health. I was panicking about the money. I was mentally calculating my deductible, wondering if this hospital was in network, wondering if the specific doctor who would see me was out of network, trying to figure out if I could just tough it out at home, because an ambulance ride in the US can literally cost you $3,000. I was sitting on my bathroom floor in London, crying, trying to decide if my life was worth going into debt for. And my British roommate looked at me like I was insane. She said, "Olivia, just go to AANDE. That's the emergency room here. Just go, it's free." So I went, I walked in, I gave them my name and my address, I was seen by a doctor, they ran a bunch of tests, they gave me a prescription, and then I just walked out. I kept waiting for someone to hand me a clipboard with a bill. I kept waiting for the catch, but there was no catch. I went to the pharmacy to pick up my medication, and in England, there is a flat prescription charge. It was roughly £9. That was it, £9. In the US, we tie our healthcare to our employment. Have you ever actually thought about how insane that is? How did that even start? Well, let me give you a quick history lesson, because I had to look this up. During World War II, the US government imposed wage freezes to control inflation. Employers couldn't offer more money to attract workers, so they started offering fringe benefits, specifically health insurance, to get around the wage freeze. The IRS eventually ruled that these employer-sponsored health benefits were tax-free, and boom, we accidentally created a system where your literal ability to stay alive is chained to your boss. Before we continue, I need to address the silent majority. Apparently 87% of you watching are not subscribed. So if you are one of those people who keeps returning for the drama, the comparisons, and the mild psychological damage, hit subscribe. You're already part of this at this point. Meanwhile, right after that same war, the UK was completely devastated. They had been bombed to rubble. They were broke. But in 1948, the Minister of Health, Aneurin Bevan, spearheaded the creation of the National Health Service, the NHS. The core principle was that healthcare should be available to all, based on clinical need, not the ability to pay. They decided that a healthy population was a fundamental human right, not a luxury good. In America, millions of people stay in toxic jobs they absolutely hate, working for abusive bosses because they are terrified of losing their health insurance. People stay in abusive marriages to keep their spouse's insurance. People literally avoid going to the doctor when they find a lump because they are terrified that the copays and deductibles will bankrupt their family. Medical debt is the number 1 cause of bankruptcy in the United States. Do you know what the primary cause of medical bankruptcy is in the UK? Nothing. It doesn't exist. The concept of medical bankruptcy is a uniquely American phenomenon. Tell me, how are you a free citizen if your right to exist on this earth is held hostage by a corporate insurance conglomerate that makes billions of dollars by actively denying your medical claims? The freedom from medical anxiety is the most profound freedom I have ever experienced in my life. Knowing that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, or if I get diagnosed with a horrible disease, my life might change, but I won't lose my home. That is real freedom. But of course, whenever I bring this up online, I get the exact same comment from angry Americans. But Olivia, the taxes. Europeans pay 80% in taxes. They take all your money. Okay, let's do the math. Let's really look at this because the American perception of European taxes is deeply flawed. Yes, my income tax is slightly higher here in the UK than it was in my specific state back home. But in the US, your tax burden isn't just your income tax. We have so many hidden taxes that we just accept as normal bills. In America, you are paying hundreds of dollars a month for your health insurance premium. Then you have a massive deductible you have to hit before insurance even kicks in. Then you have copays. That is a tax. You are paying thousands of dollars a month for private childcare because the US doesn't have subsidized early years care. That is a tax. You are paying $500 a month for your student loans because higher education in the US is treated as a profit center rather than a public good. That is a tax. When you add up all those out-of-pocket expenses that Americans have to pay just to survive, the average middle-class American is actually paying significantly more of their income toward basic living necessities than the average British person. My taxes here in the UK buy me a civilized society. They buy me a functioning healthcare system. They buy me public transport. They buy me a society where people aren't driven to absolute desperation. I am more than happy to pay a little bit more in income tax if it means my neighbor doesn't die because they can't afford insulin. And speaking of public transport, let's talk about mobility. I always thought freedom was getting my driver's license at 16. I remember that feeling. The keys in my hand, the open road. In America, the car is the ultimate symbol of liberty. But over the last 2 years, I realized something terrifying. The American car isn't an instrument of freedom. It is a mandatory financial anchor. Look up Euclidean zoning from the 1920s. It is the zoning model that most American cities are built on. It strictly separates residential areas from commercial areas. It is illegal to build a grocery store or a cafe in the middle of a typical American suburban neighborhood. We have built an entire country on the scale of cars, not on the scale of humans. In 90% of the United States, if you do not own a car, you cannot participate in society. You can't get to work, you can't buy groceries, you can't socialize. I can walk out my front door right now, and within 5 minutes I can walk to a grocery store, 3 pubs, a pharmacy, a park, and a train station. If I want to go to another city, I just walk to the station, tap my phone, and hop on a train. I don't own a car here, I don't need one. I don't have a car payment, I don't pay car insurance, I don't stress about finding parking, I don't sit in gridlock traffic on a 6-lane highway having a slow-motion panic attack. True freedom of movement is having options. It is the ability to choose whether you want to walk, cycle, take the bus, take the train, or drive. In America, you don't have a choice. You drive or you stay home. That is a monopoly, not a freedom. And let's talk about our homes. In the US, we scream about private property rights. Get off my land, my house, my rules. We love this rugged individualist cowboy narrative, but have you ever actually looked at an American homeowners association? HOAs dictate the lives of millions of Americans. You buy a house with your own hard-earned money, and then a board of busybody neighbors gets to legally fine you. If your grass is a 1/4 of an inch too high, or if you paint your front door the wrong shade of blue, or if you park a commercial vehicle in your own driveway. In some states, an HOA can legally foreclose on your house over unpaid fines for weeds in your flower bed. How is that freedom? How are you the king of your castle if Linda from down the street can literally take your home away because she doesn't like your mailbox? In the UK, sure, we have planning permissions and conservation areas, but the sheer micromanagement of your daily domestic life by an HOA is practically unheard of here. People mind their own business. There is a sense of privacy and respect for your personal space that I honestly find so refreshing. The British cultural mindset is very much my home is my sanctuary. The American mindset, ironically, is incredibly communal when it comes to policing each other's aesthetics to protect property values. But I think the deepest, most visceral difference in freedom comes down to safety. And this is the hardest one to talk about, but we absolutely have to. When I first moved here, I had a lot of unlearning to do. I didn't even realize the level of low-grade, constant terror I was carrying around in my body until I left the United States. In America, whenever I walked into a movie theater, a shopping mall, or a concert, the very first thing I did, subconsciously, without even thinking about it, was scan the room for the emergency exits. I would automatically calculate my escape route. If I was sitting in a restaurant and someone walked in looking agitated or wearing a heavy coat in the summer, my heart rate would spike. When my little niece started kindergarten back home, my sister had to buy her a bulletproof insert for her PAW patrol backpack. And we all just normalized this. We accepted it as the price of freedom. The freedom to bear arms in the United States has completely eradicated the freedom to exist in public spaces without fear. Living in the UK, that ambient anxiety is just gone. It took me about a year to realize I had stopped looking for the exits. I stopped looking over my shoulder. Our police officers here, for the most part, don't even carry guns, and a lot of Americans mock that. They think it makes the UK weak or vulnerable. But let me tell you what it actually does. It de-escalates the entire society. Interactions with law enforcement here aren't inherently lethal situations. A routine traffic stop isn't a life or death encounter where you have to keep your hands gripped to the steering wheel so you don't get shot. The gun culture in the US is rooted in this extreme individualism, this idea that you are on your own, the world is dangerous, and you need to be heavily armed to protect yourself and your family. The UK culture is fundamentally different. It is rooted in a collective social contract. We give up the right to own assault weapons so that the collective society can be safe. And I know some Americans will argue, well, the UK has knife crime. Yes, knife crime exists here, but the scale is incomparable. A person with a knife cannot kill 60 people from a hotel window in 10 minutes. A person with a knife cannot massacre a classroom of small children before the police even breach the door. The statistical reality is that I am exponentially safer walking alone at night in London than I ever was in my hometown in America. The freedom from fear is a human right that Americans have completely sacrificed on the altar of the Second Amendment. So what does this all mean? Am I saying America is an awful place and I hate it? No, I love my home country. I love the optimism of Americans. I love the friendliness. I love our national parks. But I am angry. I am so angry that I was lied to for my entire life. I was told that freedom meant rugged individualism. I was told it meant lowering corporate taxes and defunding public services so I could have a slightly larger paycheck to spend on private healthcare and an expensive car. I was told that collective systems like universal healthcare, strong labor unions, strict food regulations, and robust public transit were somehow inherently anti-freedom. I was told they were tyranny. But living in the UK has taught me that true freedom isn't just about what you are allowed to do, it is about what you are supported in doing. Negative freedom, the freedom from government interference, is what America excels at. But positive freedom, having the actual resources, safety and time to pursue your life's goals, is where America fails completely. What good is the freedom of speech if you are too exhausted from working 3 jobs to raise your voice? What good is the freedom to travel if your employer won't give you a single day of paid time off? What good is the freedom to start a business if leaving your corporate job means losing your family's health insurance and risking total financial ruin? In Europe, the government actually steps in to protect you from the crushing weight of unfettered capitalism. They regulate the food so you don't have to be a chemist. They provide the healthcare so you don't have to be a millionaire. They mandate the vacation time so you can actually know your children. They build the trains so you aren't trapped in a metal box on a highway. That is what I didn't understand until I lived here. American freedom is incredibly lonely. You are entirely on your own. If you fall, you hit the concrete. British freedom, European freedom, relies on a social safety net. It is the understanding that we are a society, not just 300 million individuals competing for resources in a brutal economic Hunger Games. I don't think I could ever go back to the US permanently. Not now that I have tasted what actual systemic freedom feels like. I don't want to go back to scanning movie theaters for active shooters. I don't want to go back to arguing with health insurance agents on the phone for 3 hours to get a basic blood test covered. I don't want to go back to a culture where my worth is tied solely to my productivity. We need to redefine the word freedom in America. We really do. We need to look in the mirror and realize that we are being scammed. We are being sold a version of freedom that only benefits massive corporations, insurance companies, and billionaires, while the rest of us are stressed, sick, overworked, and terrified. I thought I was free in America. I really did. But the truth is, I was just completely blind to the cage I was living in. And honestly, realizing that has been the most liberating experience of my entire life